faked you out. That's right. I didn't do the yo part, but you know what? I just wanted to see if you'd stay tuned or not. And
I'm sitting there like, wait a minute.
I was like, yeah, what's he doing? It's done messed up again, man. Yeah. So we were just discussing that maybe we need some new equipment, man. We've been doing this for almost 4 years now, and we made what we felt like was an initial big purchase 4 years ago, and got this to work out. And maybe it's time to start investing a little bit. We get some overseas investments going on, man. We'd be like Live Golf, even though they're going away here before too long. Yeah,
take away all the PGA.
I know, right? Yeah, and now the Saudis are pulling their money, and it's up in the air right now as to what's going to go on.
A lot of stuff in Saudi is up in the air right now.
A lot of stuff
coming down from the air.
I was going to say a lot of stuff is up in the air overseas right now, for sure, man. For sure. But anyways, as always, I am Pastor Keenan, and thank you so much for tuning in to People Suck, Love Them Anyways. I'm joined by my sidekick, Nikki Nick, and man, we're here to talk about just anything and everything under the sun. What about, man, let's go with this really quick. What about this ship that's floating around out in the middle of nowhere right now with this hantavirus on it, man? What's happening with that?
I don't know.
Could this be COVID round 2?
I was like, with gas prices, I hope so. I'm not going to complain.
We need a factory reset, man.
we need a hard reset the USA again. One more time, please.
Yes.
Maybe the whole world.
Right.
But yeah, it's pretty crazy. I didn't really know anything about it. So I think Monday night I was taking the trash out. My dad was happened to take it out at the same time, and he was talking about like why he would never go on a cruise ship. And he said, it just seems like every time I hear anything about a cruise ship, it's about somebody getting sick on one and getting stuck in the middle of the ocean.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, I get it. I just don't like the ocean. That's why I don't want to go on one.
Well, these poor folks have been circling now for like 3 weeks, I think, something like that, 2 or 3 weeks. They've had, I think the last time I read, like 4 or 5 deaths. And the crazy part is that this virus has mutated to where it used to just be like transferred from like rat excrements over to like you had to come in physical contact with it somehow, some way. And now they're thinking that it's airborne somehow, some way. Yeah, and so that's yeah, right. like that's where you remember that show. I think it was Lost? I think that like went so long on ABC where they like crashed out on the island and they were there for like forever and a day.
It turns out they were all dead.
Yeah.
It's like, sorry, spoiler alert.
We may need to find an island, man, for these people to just like chill them on. You know,
I hear Epstein had one, but I don't.
Let's bring it back and do something good with it for a change, and see what happens, man. But yeah, like that's crazy to think about. Like me and my coworkers were talking about it today, and it's like you're just floating around at sea, not knowing like when you're going to see your people again, if you're going to see your people again. And it's just crazy to think about. But on the top of that, my coworker who has a daughter that's in college right now, going to school to be a nurse, said that her instructor today, her professor, basically said like, "Hey, you guys need to get ready because it's coming at some point in time. Like it's going to show up in the U.S. and you need to get ready because we don't know because right now it has a mortality rate of up to 40%, and that's something that with COVID, COVID like however you stood on the sidelines of COVID, like whether you thought it was the most horrible thing ever or you were like, it wasn't that bad, I think we can all agree and we can see from the data that it didn't have a mortality rate of up to 40%, right? And so, with this, it's like, it's kind of like
it's a much smaller sample size.
Yeah, well, that's true, and so like, and you got to step back and go, man, like how crazy is this right now? Do we go into another, shutdown? What does that look like? And it's kind of crazy because you got a lot of factors that's going on right now. You got the oil situation, you got gas, you got groceries, you got the, the Strait of Hormuz, like things like that. And then you add on this virus on top of that, and it's like, man, it's like,
what's the Bible say about like plagues?
And wars and rumors and wars and droughts and famines and sickness and like all of this good stuff. But I tell you what, like, let's put the Bible stuff aside. It's like, is midterms coming up? Because I feel like, man, that it seems like that. Because not only that, I know that people are like, is this a Christian podcast? What are they talking about right now? Because, honestly, if you look at all the states, too, they're trying to redistrict and they're trying to, like, reset and restructure how you vote so they can get different seats and, like, things like that. And so I know, right? Well, there's Florida, there's Tennessee, there's Virginia, there's a lot of different states out there that's moving stuff around, and so it's like, man, the Christian inside of me says, don't worry, God's in control. the conspiracy theorist inside of me says midterms are coming up. So let's throw all of the world into panic and chaos, and then let's like divide everybody out, man. Because I feel, I mean, what do we say all the time? A divided people will fall, right? And that's where I feel like that, whether it's government or whether it's the devil or whether it's whoever, like, you divide and then you conquer. And that is, that is the enemy's attack. But not only is that the enemy's attack, man, that is a lot of times how systems control you, divide and attack.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked a lot last week, financial on the financial side of things, about how much of a struggle it's been for a lot of people. And I, again, continue to feel that. We continue to feel that on a pretty hardcore level. But we talk a lot about you're putting pressure on a lot of people right now. Where financial pressure is probably the tightest form of pressure when it comes to people. As you get picking on their pocketbook. Per se, or I guess on their digital bank account, whatever you call it now.
I saw something, right? Yeah. And I don't know what a digital bank account looks like, man. Are you talking about crypto?
No.
Oh, okay. I was like,
a bank account you check. Right?
You're talking about like online banking?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I got you. You said digital banking, and it messed me up. I guess I don't know, but
synonyms. It's
not, man. It's not.
4 years ago.
I read the other day, man, and it literally made me just stop and go. Like, you heard that song, things that make you go, anyways, I read this and it's like, if you were to solve or if you were to take away financial problems, watch how much mental health would grow. And whenever you see the direct correlation, whenever you start to see like debt, or you start to see whether it be like whatever it is, man, like we've talked about this last week, things are expensive anymore. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, things are expensive. And so whenever you have the weight, the burden, I just had a repairman out in my house yesterday, and we were talking about it. And he said he had 2 people cancel on him yesterday morning because of unexpected expenses coming up. One of them was a dishwasher, and he was supposed to go look at it. And he said the woman called him and said, "Hey, look, I can wash dishes by hand. I can't take care of this other expense by hand. Like, I have to pay it, And it's like, what kind of world are we living in today? And don't get me wrong, I know a dishwasher is like a modern convenience. It's a luxury, okay, whatever. But what kind of world are we living in where you have to begin to think about or sacrifice and go, well, you know what, I can't afford a dishwasher fix this month. I can hand wash some dishes. So because of this other bill that's come up, it's like, what kind of world are we living in? And then you begin to stress, man. Mm-hmm. Like, you begin to stress about that. And I know, like, listen, I know the Bible says, hey, don't worry about anything. Pray about everything, and in all things give thanks, and it's like, it's easy to say, and it's easy to talk about, and it's easy to tell somebody that. But the other side of that is, Nick, is that when I look at you and you look at your bank account and it's negative, whatever it is, notice I didn't say positive. So it's getting there? It's getting there. Well, let me speak death over it.
Go right. It's dying anyway.
Yeah, so you look at your bank account and it's getting close to the negative, going to creep into it. And I look at you and I say, don't worry. Don't worry. This is all something to teach you, minor afflictions, all of this good stuff, right?
Facebook girls have been telling me this week. Right. it's like it knows.
But you look at that and you're like, okay, it's easier for you to say because it's not your problem to face right now. And I think that's where a lot of times we can like try to supply scripture to people and like try to give them hope. But the deal of it is that if we give them hope, but we don't show them hope, I feel like a lot of times, where I really was like studying this week about God's not going to ask you to give what you don't have, but He will ask you to give what you have left. You know what I mean? And so whenever we go to be a blessing to somebody, let's just say like, oh, you're going to find somebody one day, like they'll treat you right and all that good stuff. Like, that is good to tell them. But until they find that person, hey, why don't you show them that true love does exist? I'm not talking about in a sexual type way. I'm talking about like, if relational type way. Yeah, like show them that a good person does exist. Show them that a good heart and a good intentions does exist. If they're struggling with finances, show them that a blessing does exist. If they're struggling with health, like show them that a blessing through health and through discipline does exist. It's not enough just to quote scripture, but if we can show scripture to people, I feel like that can be a blessing to people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like a thing we struggle with a lot as modern day Christians, is actually putting, because I mean, we poke fun at and make fun of all kinds of people all the time that are, thoughts and prayers, sending up a little clapping hand emoji
that we thought was prayer hands.
Yeah. Prayer hands, but putting that in the comment section or saying, it's all going to work out. God's got this. God, like and again, not to say that that's not good, not to say that that's not what you should do, but it's there's a lot of people giving words when they could give money,
right?
Giving thoughts and prayers when they could give time.
Yeah.
It's just like, you've been called to give, like, like you just said, give what you have left. We're talking about the early church in the book of Acts, how they were sharing what they had with one another. Someone had lack of and someone had abundance of, they would share with one another.
And it gets great with that, man, until, and I was talking to a coworker the other day about this, about how there's a fine line between cult and church. There's a fine line. And if you're doing it out of flesh, that's where it gravitates more towards a cult, because you have one person in control, in power, that's directing everything through them. But this early modern day church that you're talking about devised a system. They had people, they had processes in place that would take care of this and funnel out like it needed to.
Yeah, I mean, like the disciples, they didn't have jobs.
Right.
Like they're going out here, whether it's, Peter or Paul or Barnabas or Silas or whoever, they're going out. And they're not working jobs, but they're taken care of. They have people who give them shelter, people who feed them, people. Now they did earn their way a little bit. They helped out because Paul used to be a tent maker. He put some hands to the plow there. But ultimately they weren't doing a job that they were getting paid for. They were just being taken care of by other believers, by good-hearted individuals.
Yeah.
And that's just something that rarely exists these days. We talk about how it's so difficult for us to see the miracles of the New Testament of the early church, but those people weren't doing anything but spreading the gospel.
Yeah.
They didn't have jobs, they didn't have debt, they didn't have worries, they didn't have anxieties, they didn't have families.
Right.
In a lot of cases, and so it's just the way we have set ourselves up in the modern world is almost the antithesis. It's almost the opposite of what.
I'm glad you.
I'm co-opted in for.
Thank you. You saw my eyebrow. Yeah, my eyebrows went to my hairline, which is way far back than what it used to be.
It's like the opposite of what we need. But again, we just live in a society again today where it's so much easier, like we say, to just throw out the verses, to throw out the support, to throw out the encouragement. But you have to ask yourself, is there more you can do? Yes, sometimes praying for somebody is the only thing you can do. That's 100% possible. But it's just these small little things that you can do for people that means a lot to them.
Right.
Like my mother-in-law and my father-in-law have shopped 11 different gas stations looking for this energy drink beside me. Like they're just trying to find it for a long time. But just the small little fact that my mother-in-law found it, kept searching for it, found it, even brought it tonight when I wasn't expecting it, is a blessing. When I can't afford to buy my own right now.
Right. Yeah.
Just those little small things are big blessings to people. And you don't know how much a little word of encouragement, yes, that is awesome. That's helpful to people.
Yeah.
But, how much more helpful would it be to buy a $5 McDonald's meal for them one day?
Right.
Or to, fill up their gas tank, or, to even pay for half their gas tank.
Well, I think we discount blessings because they seem small to us, so it's like, and even one like, that me and my wife share, like a lot of times I'll stop by the gas station on my way home and get a $1.95 Big Gulp Coke. She loves like
79 cents.
I know, right? I know. And it's like it's one of those like it's not a funnel Coke, but what is it called? Like it's a fountain drink. Yeah, fountain drink. And like it literally makes her day. Like if I walk through the door with a fountain drink, like and again it's $1.95. So it's not like I'm out spending $200 to make her happy. But it's just a little blessing along the way that will literally say, hey, like, I love you. I appreciate you. I support, I see you, and it's like those little things, man, where we think a lot of times it's like we attach a blessing to a price. And it's like, the more that I pay, the bigger blessing is going to be. That's not the case.
Unless it's Red Lobster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, nah, bro. Yeah. It's like, nah, bro. If it's a hot fry, I'll take a hot fry from McDonald's any day of the week, But, it's just things like that where we look and we think to ourselves, it's like, oh, man, if it's not big, then it's not going to be appreciated. And it's like, no, that's not the case, man. A lot of times people, you look at the early church, you look at things like that where it's, again, God didn't ask them to give what they didn't have. He asked them to give everything they did have. And whenever they gave everything they did have and they put it into the right hands, it was multiplied out. And you can go back and read the verse where it says nobody had a need for anything. That's crazy to me. Like nobody had a need for anything because everything was shared. And again, that sounds great in biblical times, but what we've allowed today is that whenever people take it out of context and they do it not in the spiritual, but in their own physical self, then they get wrapped up in the process. And that's where you get your Jim Joneses. That's where you get your David Koresh's. That's where you get your Charlie Mansons. That's where you get. I just watched a Hulu documentary called The Cult of Nature Boy. And I didn't even know who this dude was, man. But like, I mean, same thing where it's like, he finds a movement that people get behind, and then it's like all of a sudden now you're having people gravitate, and there's no rhyme, there's no reason, there's no group, there's no nothing. It's like everything comes and runs through that person. And because that happens, guess what? Like now you have this fall of man or this collapse of this movement because there was nothing biblical or spiritual about it whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, one thing I was listening to a sermon podcast, whatever you call it, earlier this week, from Craig Groeschel's church, and he was talking a lot about selfishness. Now he was talking a lot about like selfishness in relationships, marriages, things of that nature. I know this is something that we've been pretty hard on on this podcast, is just how selfish Christians have become.
Yeah.
It's just because I mean a lot of what he said hit me hard. Like I know I've been very, very selfish in a lot of different areas. So I mean, I will admit to that, and I hope a lot of other Christians will admit to that as well, that they've been selfish, that, we're oftentimes focused about what we want, what sometimes even what we need over what someone else may want or need.
Right.
Whether it's your spouse, whether it's your friend, whether it's your, coworkers, whether it's your church members, whoever it may be, we're oftentimes putting our needs, wants, and desires over that of other people.
Right.
And it's a very, very toxic mindset and mentality that's kind of seeped its way into the modern church, and you see it again just in all kinds of different areas and ways, because it becomes, I think it's almost like a little bit of a spectrum too, because you have like your cult members whose selfishness has crept in so deep, it's become narcissistic.
Right.
It's like, I need everybody to be focused on me and giving me everything all the time.
Yeah.
But, it could be just as minor as, I'm not going to listen to what the other people in the church want. I want to do things this way.
Right.
I want this carpet color. I want this type of TV. I want this type of whatever. It's just all of these types of things where we can be very selfish, over even small minor things. When we have somebody come to us and we're like, hey, it's again one of those things where we're all struggling right now. There's not a single person that goes to this church that's not struggling in some way, shape, or form right now.
Or anybody who listens to the podcast.
Or listens to the podcast. Wherever in the world you may be.
Right.
You're struggling in some way, shape, or form. And so, you're listening to us sitting here being like, buy a meal for somebody, buy an energy drink for somebody. But, sometimes that $1.95 is enough to kill or, somebody.
Right, yeah.
Like I'm getting there.
Right.
And so it's like, that's a lot to ask of people. To give, when it hurts. And a lot of people have abused that.
Yeah.
God said to give. It doesn't matter if you've got it or not, you give. And, that narcissism kind of creeps over, and you have this one person who's, super rich and powerful over a bunch of people who have nothing, and that's not what we're talking about. It's just all about, asking, because we talk a lot about how people are so surface level. When they come into a church, it's how you doing? Good, fine, awesome. How was your week? It was okay, it was good, fine, awesome, whatever. Yeah. We don't ask those questions. We as Christians are not vulnerable enough to discuss those things. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to get in front of somebody else and say, I don't know if I have enough money to pay for gas this week. I don't know.
What do you think that we struggle? Like, all right, so here's my thing. And like, it may be a struggle. Some people may view it as a struggle, but I struggle to talk about my problems with other people, because I feel like, and I think I voiced this from the stage even Sunday, that like everybody's got problems. So like if I come in and I'm like, man, I tell you what, like I don't know how, like it's super tight, like it's like, it's almost like I would rather struggle in silence, because I know that other people are struggling with the same thing, and it's like if I get together and Nick's got problems, I've got problems, and so me and him are getting together, and it's like, I've got this going on. 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 So if we're bouncing problems back and forth, man, like, is there a solution in that? Or like, I mean, that's something that I do struggle with, is that I don't like to broadcast problems, because I feel like we all have problems, and my problems aren't different from anybody else's. I mean, that's what the Bible says. Like, there's nothing new under the sun. Like somebody's been through what you've been through, so it's like, and there's a way out of it. There's a way through it, obviously. And so it's like, do you think maybe that's the reason why people are surface level a lot of times?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that, because I think you even said this on Sunday, you got two people that are going back and forth with one another, and you're just, comparing, the size of your problems. You know,
Right.
I've got this much in the bank account. Well, I've only got this much.
Yeah, exactly.
Account.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I couldn't afford to pay this bill. I couldn't afford to pay 2 bills this week. You know, or you know, I'm not feeling very good. My back hurts. Well, you know, I found out somebody's got stage 3 cancer. You know, like it gets into this very, you know. But I think that's where you kind of, I think human beings are designed to do that.
Yeah.
I think it's what we're pressured into doing, where I think, you know, what we need to get better at is listening. And I think that's something that may seem mind blowing to some, but I think is just common sense to others. Is, you know, you hear it all the time. You know, like, you know, I think of an episode of Parks and Recreation. You know, if you've ever heard of that, it's maybe
is that a Christian show?
No, it's not. No, it's not. But you know, in this show though, like one of the guys and this girl, it's definitely not Christian because they're not married and they're pregnant. But you know, it's fine. That doesn't happen in Christian circles ever. But again, you know, they were in a relationship. You know, she was
shout out Mary and Joseph. Right, you know,
a little different. But you know. They were, you know, in a relationship. You know, she was pregnant, having all kinds of pregnancy symptoms, and he was like super Mr. Fix-It guy. Like, I'm going to do everything I can to fix your problems, take care of your problems, keep your problems from being a problem. And you know, the friends all told him like, hey, you need to stop trying to fix all her problems because it's making her angry. She just wants to vent and wants you to be like, wow, that sucks.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, I think sometimes we get in that, okay, you know, I'm going to try and, you know, complain about my problems. I'm going to complain about your problems. You know, it's that back and forth where sometimes we just need someone to listen to us.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, you may not be able to help that person financially. You may not be able to take that person's diagnosis away. You may not be able to do those types of things. But, you know, when someone comes to you with a vulnerable heart and shares something very vulnerable, you know, you have to have enough self-awareness not to go back at them with your problems.
Yeah.
You know,
or your judgment.
Exactly. Your judgment or your problems.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay. And again, maybe try to bring a solution to the table. Is there something you can do?
I think if they feel safe enough to confidently, you know, expose themselves to you, and not in a physical way, not in a get arrested type way.
No.
Yeah, right. Yeah, let me take. Yeah, right. Let me take that back. But you know, if they feel confident enough, man, to begin to peel back the layers of their life and tell you about it, yes. I mean, like, you have to be able to harness that judgment, which you shouldn't have anyways. But to listen with compassion, and then maybe, like you said, give some direction along the way. At the bare minimal, pray for them. You know, at the bare minimal, do what you're supposed to do as a Christian and pray for them.
Specifically pray for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and that comes back to vulnerability. You know, don't just, you know, we talk about this a lot.
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
Blanket, unspoken prayer requests. You know, no. If you're struggling with something, what are you struggling with? Let me help pray for you. Are you struggling with finances, and God, you know, help them to see God as their provider. God, show up as their provider in their life.
Right.
You know, not just these blanket, you know, unspecific, unspecified prayers. You know, you have to, if you're going to be vulnerable. Both ways. You know, like, be vulnerable enough to share what you're going through specifically, and also be vulnerable enough to pray for that person over that specific thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, again, that's a two-way street. Like, you know, you have to be able to harness those thoughts that you have, and to be able to, and this is why it's so important, even as a Christian, man, to be in the Word and to be prayerful and to be seeking the feet of Jesus, because you don't know who's going to roll up, you know, in your path at some point in time and be like, and just unload on you and you know, talk about problems and you're sitting there like, I don't know what to do. Like, I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready. And it's like, well, you have to be ready. That's why the Word says to be ready in and out of season. Like, you have to be ready in the moments where you are ready, where you are expecting it, but you have to be ready whenever you're literally, you know, got this train coming down the train. No, I mean, you have to be ready when you're getting gas at the gas station, when you're at Walmart. You have to be ready, because you never know who you're going to cross and who has that need at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think it's important too, because I know, like myself, you know, I mean, and this goes back to that selfish conversation of where, you know, when I'm going through something and I feel like the weight of the world's on my shoulders, and I feel like crap, and I feel confused, and I feel conflicted, and then, you know, I as a Christian am called to care for other people. You know, and someone comes to me, it's very difficult. You know, we talk a lot about pouring from an empty cup. You know, you have to fill yourself. You know, you have to fill yourself with the Word, with the worship, with the Spirit, with the, you know, whatever Christian thing you want to throw in there that's positive, encouraging. You know, you want to be sure that you have something left in that reserve tank to pull from when someone comes to you when you are struggling, and someone comes to you and needs help from you. You know, to be able to give them some kind of encouragement, to give them some kind of blessing, to be something that they need in that moment, rather than just blowing them off because your life sucks.
Right.
Because that's very easy to do. my life sucks. I ain't got time to worry about your problems. I ain't got time to worry about anybody else's problems. I don't care what you're going through. I'm going through something, and it's too much for me to handle right now.
Right.
So I don't want to, I don't want to talk to somebody. I don't want to listen to anybody.
Yeah.
And that's where we get shut off. We shut ourselves off from people. We shut ourselves off from the fellow congregants in church. We shut ourselves off from our coworkers. Because we feel like we are struggling so much. We don't have time to help anybody else or deal with anybody else's problems.
Yeah.
But we can't be like that as Christians,
Right.
and that's tough. That's difficult. That's hard to do because we got problems and we want to talk about our problems,
Right.
rather than help somebody else with their problems. But again, we can't be selfish Christians in that matter.
To reference back to Acts chapter 2 really quick, and then I'm shutting it down. We're trying a couple things. We're doing shorter podcasts, not because we want to sometimes, but because we're on time constraints, right? And so, but I think it's working out good. I think we're hitting points. Maybe you don't go to sleep in the middle of them, whatever the case is.
We don't go off on 13 tangents.
There you go. But to tie back into Acts chapter 2, what I want to say is really quick, like if you go back and look at that, again, God's not asking you to give what you don't have, but to give everything you do have. And whenever you do that, like, yes, it's going to create a need in your life, but it's like a funnel system. If the person behind you is giving everything and the person in front of you is giving everything, then you're not going to have a need because you're going to keep on funneling what you have into others, into others, into others. Like it's just going to keep that process going. And so if we can figure that out, Nick, like if we can figure out how each and every person can literally be a link in the chain, how we can be a link in the chain of giving, of praying, of loving, of caring, of generosity, of faithfulness, all that good stuff. Like if we can learn how to be that link, then I feel like the needs, of course there's always going to be a need, but that's why you add one more link into the chain. If there's a need, like find somewhere that person can fit in, bless them, but then teach them, hey, look, like it's not just for you to hold on to, it's for you to give to the next person as well. And whenever you start doing that, man, you start just to see this overwhelming flow of blessings happen in the process. So my thing to you would be tonight is that, everybody has a need, everybody has a situation, everybody has a storm, a mountain, whatever you want to say. But until we learn to give what we have, we'll never receive what we need.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is, I've heard countless stories. You may not have listening, but I've heard a lot of different stories of people who gave, like they didn't have any money to give. They were down to their last few bucks, and then God lays it on their heart to give those few bucks to somebody. And they're like, I don't know how I'm going to pay this bill I got coming up, and they give that money to that person because that's what God wanted them to do. And now they're sitting there like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But then somebody else into their life the exact amount that they needed. Somehow, some way, God is that provider. He's Jehovah Jireh. God is the provider. And so it's so important for you to grasp that. It's so important for me to grasp that. And to trust, and again, you have to be in the Word. You have to know the voice of God before you just go willy-nilly doing things, being crazy, because God ain't gonna bless stupidity,
right?
But you want to make sure that you're using the wisdom that God gave you, and that you're relying on the voice of God, the Word of God, the direction of God. If God lays it on your heart to do something that seems scary, that seems like a major sacrifice, it's trusting God enough to do that because someone else in that chain is going to pour into you and provide what you need eventually. And it's scary, it's difficult, it's not comfortable, but it is something that is very important. It's happened in other people's lives before. If God's done it before, He will do it again.
Absolutely. If God's done it before, He'll do it again. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you guys so much for hitting the download button. Thank you guys so much for the support. And until we see you again, tell more people about People Suck, Love Them Anyways. We love you so much and be blessed.